The 2025 offseason is just a few days away, so with that being said, let's go ahead and do my 2-round NFL mock draft. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, hit the like and subscribe button, let's hop into it. So as you can see, we are on the PFF mock draft simulator. We're going to be doing 2 rounds, no trades. We're going to begin with the Tennessee Titans, and I think that taking a quarterback here is probably the way we're going to end up going here, because I think they have the pieces necessary to already kind of start building a decent roster around a quarterback. Spending the first overall pick on Cam Ward might seem like a little bit of a reach, but truth be told, this team is so desperate for a franchise quarterback that I think it just makes a ton of sense. Cam Ward is the ultimate improviser. He loves to throw the deep ball, which is something that Will Levis also kind of like to do, but at the same time, Cam Ward is a better prospect than Will Levis. I think Cam Ward will instantly go in there, make that offense better. Yes, they have to address positions like right tackle, probably wide receiver 2, and a couple other spots, but I do think they can fix some of those spots in the draft and also in free agency. Then there's the Cleveland Browns. Now, typically in other mock drafts, I have gone Shedeur Sanders, but I don't think I'm going to go that way this time because of the recent reports that Myles Garrett has requested a trade. So with that said, it just makes total sense to go ahead and just take his replacement in Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter is by far the best edge rusher in this class, if not the best, definitely one of. I think it's pretty clear that he is the best. Arguably the best prospect in this draft. He is a ferocious pass rusher. He is absolutely dominant, extremely fast, extremely bendy, extremely twitchy. Could use a little bit of refinement, but this is a guy who had been playing linebacker for most of his time in playing football. This is a guy who spent most of his time playing linebacker in football and recently translated his game to like an edge rusher position. So he does have the flexibility to play both linebacker and edge. Reminds me in so many ways of Micah Parsons, but if he can be even 75% of Micah Parsons, then yeah, he was totally worth the number 2 overall pick. Then there's the New York Giants, and Travis Hunter fell into their laps, but I don't think there is a world where Brian Daboll goes another year without taking a quarterback. I think they almost kind of have to get a quarterback this offseason, or else they're going to be rocking with Drew Lock again, which is just a big old no-no. Shedeur Sanders is not worth a top 3 pick, but I just think the New York Giants are probably going to be too desperate to make that mistake, so they're going to have to go ahead and take Shedeur. Now, I'll say this about Shedeur Sanders. I do think he is a little bit overhated and maybe a little bit overanalyzed. I do think he is worthy of a first-round pick. I don't think he's a second-round caliber quarterback. I think he is a middle to late first overall quarterback. Shedeur Sanders is extremely accurate. I think for his game, it's surprising how bad he is in terms of being a playmaker, which would definitely have to be tuned up. But I think overall his pocket presence is okay. I mean, he played with a horrible offensive line in Colorado, so you can only take so much from it. But he's got good arm talent. His accuracy is by far the best in this draft class. So I like Shedeur Sanders. I do think he's worthy of a first, but just not a top 5 pick. Then there is the New England Patriots. With no Abdul Carter on the board, I just think you take the best player available, and I do think that is Travis Hunter. Now, Travis Hunter is probably going to play both corner and potentially wide receiver for this Patriots team, which they could kind of use a little bit of both. The interesting thing for me is going to be if he does get selected by New England, does he go full-time as a wide receiver? Because if he does, then I kind of feel like that wouldn't necessarily be worst case scenario, because they already have Christian Gonzalez and a couple other decent corners there for the Patriots. And yes, you could have Travis Hunter added to that unit and be a great cornerback 2 next to Christian Gonzalez while also playing a little bit on the offensive end. But I think for this Patriots team, they might be a little bit more inclined to use him more as a wide receiver 1 and sparingly on the defense, like maybe a couple snaps a game. Either way, no matter if you play him at corner or wide receiver, Travis Hunter is a fantastic talent. He's one of the best players in this draft. I do think he will get overanalyzed as we get closer to the draft, but I think he will be taken in the top 5 because of how great of a talent he truly is. Then there's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, in past mock drafts, I have gone Will Johnson for them, but I think this time I'll go ahead and take Mason Graham. Their defensive line would be really good with Mason Graham. Now, you could say, well, why are you trying to build on top of a strength when you need to fill in a weakness at corner? And I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I will say I do think Mason Graham is a sizable better player than Will Johnson, respective with positions. Like, I think Will Johnson's a good player, but I don't know if he's worthy of a top 5 pick. He would fill in a massive need, though, for that Jaguars team. So if you do take Will Johnson, I don't necessarily blame you. What Mason Graham does bring to this team is the ultimate run stuffer while also having really good upside to be a solid pass rusher in the league. This is somebody who's going to be in the league for probably 10 to 15 years, probably make a couple All-Pros, make some Pro Bowls. Like, this dude's going to be a productive player. And if you can get that guy with a top 5 pick, you do that 10 times out of 10. Then there is the Las Vegas Raiders. A lot of players on the board here for them. They could go Terrell McMillan to pair alongside Jacoby Myers. They can go Ashton Genty to finally give them a true running back 1. They could even go Will Johnson to get an upgrade in the cornerback room, which could definitely use so. Some other positions I'm also looking at would also be positions like, I don't know, Benjamin Morrison, Walter Nolan. But I think I know who I'm going to go ahead and take here. I think I'm going to ultimately go ahead and take Will Johnson here. The secondary for Las Vegas isn't terrible, but it could definitely use a true lockdown cornerback one. I know I just talked about how I didn't view Will Johnson as being a top 5 pick, and I truthfully don't really think so. But at pick 6, I think this is really where my window starts to open up for him, where I think he can be taken. I think 6 through probably like 16 is where I think Will Johnson will be taken. So it might be a little bit early, but this Raiders team, I think the running back draft class is deep enough, and I think they'll address the wide receiver room in either free agency or with their 3rd round pick. So I'm going to go ahead and take Will Johnson, especially because I don't think this cornerback class is particularly deep. Then there is the New York Jets. Now, they could be in the line here for Tetairoa McMillan because they definitely could use. So I also think Malachi Starks is also on the board. They do have a number of safeties on this team that got playing time, but they definitely had a bit of a void there with that safety position. So Malachi Starks could make a ton of sense for that team. Tetairoa McMillan would be almost a perfect pair alongside what you already have in Garrett Wilson, but there is a little bit of some question marks about whether Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers will return. So I'm kind of tempted to stay away from Tet McMillan because they might end up bringing back Devontae Adams, which kind of puts a big old wrench in everything. You could even go with like the high upside of a Shamar Stewart or Walter Nolan. Maybe you want to add more to your edge rushing room because for some reason they love to do so in a Mike Green or Michael Williams. Those are all options that I do think are potential names, but I think I'm going to stick here with either Tet McMillan or Malachi Starks. Because you brought in a defensive-minded guy, I'm kind of tempted to take Malachi Starks, who I don't know if I'm willing to say that he's worthy of the 7th overall pick, but in terms of being a pure talent, he is a really solid safety prospect that I think is going to come in here and make that defense a whole lot better. You're losing DJ Reed, your safeties are on the free agency potentially, so I'm thinking I'm going to go ahead and take Malachi Starks here to bolster up that defense. Your defensive line already looks pretty stout. Maybe you want to add an interior defensive lineman in round 2 or 3. Your offense is, I think, well equipped to be decent next year if you could just figure out the quarterback position. So I think I'm going to go ahead and take Malachi Starks here. Then there is the Carolina Panthers, and I got to be honest with you, this is the worst pick for the Carolina Panthers to be at because this is a team that really could use a blue chip prospect, but unfortunately with the players that are on the board and the players that are off the board, I feel like a lot of those big time blue chip, I know I'm getting a superstar prospects are kind of off the board here. Like for example, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Will Johnson, Travis Hunter, those are all names who would be perfect on this Panthers team, but I look at who's on the board here and I'm looking at like James Pierce Jr., Mike Green, because this defensive line just needs a whole lot of work. Also the secondary could also use some work, and I'll throw a name out there who I'm a big fan of, but top 10 is way too early. I love Jahdae Barron. I think he is underrated as hell on PFF, and I think people are coming around to that, but I don't think he's worthy of the 8th overall pick. But at the same time, Mike Green is a good prospect. Am I taking him pick 8? I don't know. Same with James Pierce Jr. Like this is kind of a terrible situation for them. Truth be told, if they can trade back with like a Dallas or a Miami or an Atlanta, I would definitely consider doing so. But since we're doing no trades, I think I am going to ultimately have to reach on a prospect here. And I think I'm going to end up reaching for Mike Green. Now, Mike Green is somebody who has been kind of all over my boards. I've had him taken in the top 15 before. I've had him taken near the 30th pick. As time has gone on, he has definitely been moving up my draft boards, though. And I do think he is worthy of being considered for a top 10 pick at this point. His Senior Bowl performances were ridiculous. I mean, he was so good that he sat out by the end of it. I mean, he was ridiculously good there. Good size, but might need to put on a little bit of extra weight. Pass rushing is what his expertise is going to be at the NFL level, and that's kind of what Carolina could use. So I think I'm going to go ahead and take Mike Green here. Might be a bit of a reach, but I don't know if there's any other prospect that was on that same level as him. Then there is the New Orleans Saints, and I'm seeing Tetairoa McMillan on the board here, and I'm really tempted to take him here. You put Tet McMillan with hypothetically Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, and I'm looking at the receiving core and seeing 3 great weapons and 3 great pieces for that offense to work with. I'm also looking at guys like James Pierce Jr., Michael Williams, Nick Scourton's down the board, Jack Sawyer is also here. Shamar Stewart also makes a lot of sense here, but that is a bit of a project that I think might need to have a little bit of some patience on. Ultimately speaking, I think I might go with Tet McMillan because he just gives them a size element that they just don't really have on the outside right now. I mean, you do have like Jawan Johnson, but I believe he's also a free agent, so who knows if you bring him back. But bringing in Tet McMillan, especially with all the question marks in that receiving core, would make a lot of sense. So that's a pick I haven't done before, but I actually really like the idea of Tet McMillan going to New Orleans. Then there is the Chicago Bears, and I feel like every single mock draft I have done the same thing of taking Will Campbell over and over and over again. And truth be told, till something changes, I'm probably going to keep doing this every single mock draft. But for the sake of just having a little bit of fun, I'm going to go ahead and take Ashton Jeanty here. Now, Ben Johnson is a guy who wants to have the 2 running back system. He already has DeAndre Swift. I don't necessarily know if Ashton Jeanty is like I don't really know if Ashton Jeanty is a perfect combination with what you already have in DeAndre Swift, but I do think he is good enough. Ashton Jeanty is a blue chip prospect. I mean, he is the last, in my opinion, pure blue chip prospect still on the board. Maybe outside of like Will Campbell and Tyler Warren. Those guys are fantastic prospects, but Ashton Jeanty is truly an incredible prospect. He is as good of a prospect of like 2016 Ezekiel Elliott, Christian McCaffrey coming out of Stanford, Saquon Barkley from Penn State. Like Ashton Jeanty is of that level. The only reason why he's not being taken in the top 5 is because this running back draft class is full of really good names. Now, if it was actually up to me, I would take Will Campbell. Like if I was the Bears general manager, I would be taking Will Campbell in this pick to build up the trenches. But I've done that in every single mock draft, I believe. So we'll take Ashton Jeanty to kind of switch things up this time and have a little bit of fun. San Francisco's on the board, and I don't necessarily think you can say no to Will Campbell. You can play him at center, guard, or tackle, and I think he's going to be great at any of those positions. San Francisco has a offensive line issue that needs to be addressed. They're getting older. It's not that good. I think it's about time you go ahead and find an upgrade, and that could be with Will Campbell. Next up, the Dallas Cowboys at pick number 12, and I actually kind of like the way the board fell for them. Like they still have Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka, Kelvin Banks, even James Pierce Jr. is on the board, who I think actually could be maybe a bit of an underrated pickup if they were actually to go that route. So I like a lot of the options who are on the board. They even have Benjamin Morrison, Walter Nolan, Johnny Barron down the board. Ultimately speaking, I don't really know who I'm going to take here, but I think I might end up going with Luther Burden. There has been some reports and rumors about this team really wanting to add a wide receiver next to CeeDee Lamb, and if you're going to do so, this might be the draft to do so, because I don't think Luther Burden or Emeka Egbuka will come off the board earlier than pick 12, so they could potentially be in line to get an upgrade in the receiving core, which they desperately do need. You have CeeDee Lamb, who could play on the outside and on the inside. I think by adding Luther Burden, you're getting somebody who you probably want to play a bit more in the slot, but I do think he has the versatility to also play on the outside. I think he has the highest upside of the remaining names on the board here, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and take Luther Burden here. Then Miami's on the board. They have got to address offensive line. It has been a consistent thorn in the ass of this franchise for years at this point. Josh Simmons, I think, is a great prospect, but is coming off a bit of a leg injury, so a little bit cautious about that. So I think I might end up taking Kelvin Banks here. I think Kelvin Banks is the best offensive tackle in this class. Now, I said offensive tackle, not offensive lineman, because I view Will Campbell as being an offensive guard at the NFL level. Kelvin Banks is probably likely to stick at tackle, whether it's left or right. I think he's the best pass blocking tackle, but his run blocking could definitely use a bit of work. Then there is the Colts, and again, everyone does this, and I think it's the right pick. I'm going to go with Tyler Warren. He gives this offense just so much juice that they just don't have right now from that tight end position. They got a number of bodies, but no real difference makers, and that is what Tyler Warren can be. He can be a difference maker that plays all sorts of positions for this team, whether it's playing running back, tight end, receiver, quarterback. He can do it, and he would give so much fun and options for that Colts offense. Then there is the Atlanta Falcons, and James Pierce Jr. is still on the board, so I think I'm going to ultimately take him. In my opinion, he has extremely high potential to be a fantastic pass rusher at the NFL level, and in a lot of my mock drafts, I have taken this pick here, so I'm not going to overthink it. James Pierce Jr. would make a bunch of sense on an Atlanta Falcons team that just simply put needs pass rushers. They need bodies that can actually put some pressure on the quarterback. They thought Matthew Judon could do that, but wasn't really the case, so James Pierce Jr. will step in day one and hopefully be a good pass rusher and get this team going in the right direction. Then there is the Arizona Cardinals, and I think I'm going to go ahead and take Shamar Stewart. Now, I was a little bit lower on Shamar Stewart prior to Senior Bowl, but when he was out there in those camps, I mean, he was unbelievably dominant to the point where he didn't even finish the camp because of how good he looked. He is a twitched up 270, 280 pound guy. He could play on the inside. He could play on the outside. Some people will probably make the comparison of like, oh, we kind of already have that with Darius Robinson, but I think Shamar Stewart is a better prospect. He moves around a lot more fluid. He's a quick, twitchy athlete for his size. And I think he'd be a perfect complement to what they already have on the defensive line. And I think with that defense, it would give them something that they truly need right now, which is somebody who has a pass rush potential to be really good. Cincinnati's on the board. They could be losing T. Higgins, so maybe I'm inclined to take a wide receiver here. But truth be told, I kind of think you could probably wait for that in the second round, because there are some other names out there like Alec Ayamanor or Jaden Higgins that give you a bit more of that size element that they probably would like to have by losing T. Higgins. The interior of their offensive line could definitely use some work. I just don't believe in like Alex Kappa or the other guy they have. I can't think of his name, but defensive line is probably where I'm going to be looking at. And I'm looking at Micah Williams, and I'm looking at somebody who could be a perfect pair next to Trey Hendrickson. incredible athlete with very, very, very long arms, which gives him a lot of technical abilities that a lot of other players just simply don't have because of their physical stature. He is the perfect body for what you want in an edge rusher. He is just purely gifted, freak athlete, just needs to refine his technique, and I think as time goes along, he's going to be a really solid defensive lineman. Next up, you have the Seattle Seahawks, and they also need to look to address the offensive line, and well, Josh Simmons is on the board here, so I'm not going to overthink it. I think Josh Simmons is a really good tackle prospect. You can probably even move him inside to guard. Injury concerns, yes, but I'm not too worried about that. Then there's the Buccaneers. Now, if they were to lose Chris Godwin, I do think Emeka Egbuka could be a really solid replacement as somebody who's probably going to stick inside as a slot receiver. But because I think they're probably going to be able to retain Chris Godwin, I'm not going to take Emeka Egbuka, and I'm probably going to prioritize adding a corner to the secondary because this secondary really could use a true cornerback one. Now, Benjamin Morrison gives you the size element, but there is a massive hip injury concern, which, in case you don't know, having a good hip is maybe the most important thing to have in a cornerback. Jahdae Barron gives you a healthy body, but just doesn't give you the frame that you would like, nor really the speed elements. When I look at the edge rushers on the board, I just don't know if there's anybody who I'm taking at pick 19. I like Nick Scourton, but I don't think he's a true edge rusher one, which I think this team needs. And I think with the corners on the board, I'm more inclined to take them. I think I'm going to take Jahdae Barron here because with Benjamin Morrison, there's just that massive lingering question about whether or not he's healthy. Jahdae Barron is a fantastic cover corner. He can also make plays on the ball. Put him inside as a slot corner, you can play him well there. He can play safety, he can play nickel, he can play outside corner. He is a ultimate chess piece that any defense would like to have. He's a willing tackler. He's physical for his size. He's extremely physical for his size. The only question for him is he's just not a great athlete, which is fine. He's still going to run like a 4.48, 4.5 at worst. Then there is the Denver Broncos. Adding something in this receiving core has to be a must get. And I'm looking at Emeka Egbuka, and I think he might be the perfect fit for what they're trying to do in Denver. Now, you could go Colston Loveland, and I'm totally not against that either because having a tight end in Sean Payton's system is pretty important. They just don't have that body right now. But I think adding Emeka Egbuka alongside what you already have in Cortland Sutton, that room just has a bunch of bodies, but no like real difference makers. I know what I'm getting with Emeka Egbuka. I'm getting a high-end wide receiver 2 who has the potential to be a okay wide receiver 1 at the NFL level. He is going to be a fantastic player though in the NFL. Very smart, very gifted, sure hands. He's a chains mover. That's just what he's going to do. Pittsburgh's on the board here, and with the way the board fell, I'm down to 2 players, and that's Benjamin Morrison and Matthew Golden. Benjamin Morrison, to me, is just so concerning because of the injury to his hip. I mean, that is a massive injury that you just don't overcome quickly, but he is the last remaining, like, high-level prospect that if he was healthy, I think he'd probably be arguably a blue-chip guy. With Pittsburgh desperately needing a second corner next to Joey Porter Jr., I think adding Benjamin Morrison could be fun because he also gives you some good size, and you'd have a really well-sized secondary. So we'll take Benjamin Morrison and just pray to God he's okay. The LA Chargers are on the board, and I'm not going to overthink this one. I've done this a couple of times, but Colston Loveland just makes so much sense. They need to add bodies in the receiving core, whether it's tight end or wide receiver. Bringing in Colston Loveland would bring you essentially a plus-sized wide receiver playing in a tight end position. Extremely athletic, very sure-handed. Has already played with Jim Harbaugh, so there's already some connections there. I just think it makes too much sense to pass over it. Then there is the Green Bay Packers, and their pass rushing unit could definitely use some work, but I'm also looking at Matthew Golden here and thinking it could be a solid fit. Matthew Golden is really the last remaining like true wide receiver 1 type of guy, and even then I don't really know if Matthew Golden will ever be a true wide receiver 1. I think he can be. It's just going to be will he. I like Ayamanor, but he's got to work on a couple things. I think I might take Matthew Golden here because I'm looking at the edge rushers and I like Jack Sawyer, but I think he's a little bit overranked here, so I think I might take Matthew Golden. The defensive line for the Packers was very disappointing this year. You could even go Walter Nolan if you really want to, but I think you just got to give Jordan Love a true wide receiver 1. Matthew Golden is a fantastic route runner, sure-handed. Yes, he's not 6'5" or something crazy like that. So yeah, maybe the size department leaves a little bit to be desired. But if you treat this guy like a wide receiver 1, with your wide receiver 2 being guys like Dobbs and Watson and so on and so forth, I think that Matthew Golden could be a great fit for this team and be the true number 1 guy that this team has desperately needed these past few years. I know they don't typically take wide receiver, but maybe they do this year. Minnesota's on the board, and Amarian Hampton is also here. here, but I think I might take Walter Nolan here. A couple mock drafts I've taken Kenneth Grant, but adding Walter Nolan gives you a higher ceiling as a pass rusher and just as a player in general. I like Walter Nolan. I think he's a good, fantastic prospect who's just going to need a little bit of time to develop to become a great player. I think he'll be an okay player in year 1, but by year 2 and 3 and 4, I think he's going to become a good player, like or borderline greats. Houston's on the board. Interior offensive line has to be a position of need here, and Gray Zabel has increased his draft stock tremendously over these past few weeks. We're talking about somebody who prior to the Senior Bowl was maybe a second round pick, maybe, but now I kind of think he's a lock to be either a early second to late first. I'm looking at either Gray Zabel or Armand Membu. Now Membu is more likely to stick at tackle, but can also play inside as an offensive lineman, or as an interior offensive lineman, so it's definitely a possibility. But I'm looking at Gray Zabel, and I think his physicality, his play style could be a solid fit for the Texans. So I'm going to go ahead and take Gray Zabel here. LA Rams are on the board here, and I'm looking at Armand Membu. I mean, you have a couple question marks with both your tackles. Alaric Jackson's a free agent. Do you bring him back? Do you don't? You got to protect Matthew Stafford, and I think Armand Membu could be the guy. Great size, great frame, can move around quite well, has a good punch. Just needs to kind of work on a couple things like technique, and his lower body could definitely use a bit of refinement, but Armand Membu is a really good prospect. Baltimore is on the clock here, and Jack Sawyer's here. Nick Scourton's also available, which I don't necessarily dislike. I could even go Josh Connerly because they do have some question marks with some of their offensive linemen in free agency. Ronnie Stanley, Patrick Bakari. So maybe Josh Connerly comes in there and can add a body to that room. I think I'm ultimately going to stick with the edge rusher position here, and I think I might go with Nick Scourton because he just feels like a bit more of a Baltimore Raven. Big body guy, around 270 pounds, but moves very well for that size. Could be a decent pass rusher for that team, and I think as time goes on, he's going to be a fantastic pickup for them. Detroit is on the clock, and Jack Sawyer's here, and you pair Jack Sawyer with Aiden Hutchinson. I know there's the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, but they play so unlike each other in so many ways, but they're also both dominant players. Jack Sawyer is such a physical presence that you pair him next somebody who's more of a tactician like Aiden Hutchinson just makes a lot of sense. Washington is on the board here, and you could go wide receiver in Alec Ayamanor to pair alongside Terry McLaurin, and I actually really do like that. Or I could go offensive tackle and Josh Connerly to add some depth in the tackle room, but you do have some young guys there who I might want to give some time with. You could go edge rusher as well, like maybe even a Jalen Walker, who might be an option here. Donovan Ezeraku is also a name to kind of keep an eye on here. But I think I'm tempted to go with Alec Ayamanor here. It might be a little early for him, but I think this is probably where his window starts to open up. Big body, physical wide receiver that just needs to kind of work on creating separation, but at the same time just doesn't really have to do so because of how physically dominant he is. I think I'm going to take Alec Ayamanor. Really good size, great hands, could be a great fit next to Terry McLaurin. Buffalo's on the board here. Interior defensive line has been a consistent issue with this team. And truth be told, maybe even finding just a true edge rusher one could also be something that we look at here. Donovan Ezeraku is interesting because extremely great production for Boston College this year, was a dominant pass rusher. Needs to put on some size though, 6'2", 247, but I think I might be tempted to take him here because he would add a little bit of some sense to this edge rushing room that has some question marks, especially with Von Miller likely leaving. This is a pretty solid defensive interior class, so you could find one of them in the second round. So I think I'm going to take Donovan here to add a edge rushing one to this team. Or you know what? Actually, I am going to take that back. I know who I'm going to take. I will take Jalen Walker here. Highest pass rush upside of this draft class, at least remaining on the board here. Can play a linebacker, can stick him out at edge. Needs time to develop, a lot of time, probably at least a full year. So I think in year one, you're looking at somebody who might only get 4 or 5 sacks on the season, but by year 2 can get you maybe 8 to 9. By year 3, maybe 10. So Jalen Walker could be the pick here. Freak athlete, by the way. Ridiculous athlete. Philadelphia's on the board, and they probably would have liked to have gotten him there, but he did not get there. There is some question marks whether Zach Bond returns or not because he is going to get an absolute bag from other schools. So maybe you go out there and you take a Jahad Campbell to be his replacement, or do you look at adding somebody else like maybe an edge rusher like Donovan Ezeraku, Princely from Ole Miss, JT Tuimoloau? I think though I am going to go with Jahad Campbell. We know Philadelphia likes to stick with those bigger schools. Jahad Campbell comes in there, gives them somebody who can play in the linebacker room, can also come off the edge and do some things too. Kansas City's on the board. Josh Connerly's here. Not going to overthink it. The tackle room has been a mess for Kansas City. They've had to move Joe Thuney out there. Bringing in Josh Connerly would give them a steady body to put at right tackle or left tackle. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt. I'll be really quick. I did start a brand new YouTube channel called Metro Stories. I think you guys might like it. It's a channel that we simply focus on stories of NFL players as well as NFL teams. So if you guys are interested in that, go ahead and look in the description below as well as on the pinned comment where you're going to find a link for that channel. But let's get back to the video. All right, Cleveland's back on the board here and they took Abdul Carter with their first pick last time. I think this time you want to look to add something in the running back room. Amarian Hampton is on the board. You have question marks with Nick Chubb. Amarian Hampton makes a bunch of sense. By the way, the second rounds here, we're going to try to speed up through these picks, so I won't be able to give the greatest explanations, and hopefully you guys understand. Shadur Sanders was taken last time by the New York Giants. I think this time we look at adding something in the secondary, and I do see a couple names here that I do like. Siobhan Rebel gives you a bigger athlete, around what, 6'3", 193. Injury concerns though, but if he's okay, I think the athleticism department is what's going to carry him through the NFL. Trey Amos could also be an interesting prospect, might be a bit of a safer prospect because Siobhan Revel just relies so much on his athleticism, which having injury concerns already, bit of a question mark. So we'll take Trey Amos here. We'll take Trey Amos. All right, Tennessee's on the clock here. They took the quarterback in Cam Ward. I think this time you want to protect his right tackle side by giving him an offensive lineman that can actually block. Arianti Ursary can play tackle, can play on the interior. Donovan Jackson, probably more of an interior offensive lineman. Cameron Williams will be that right tackle, but I think he needs some time to truly develop. I'll also say this, there are some edge rushers on the board here who I might also take. This team has a couple good ones, but they just need a dominant one. I'm going to assume they address the tackle position in free agency, and we're going to go ahead and take Donovan Ezaraku here. All right, Jacksonville addressed the interior of their defensive line last time. This time, I'm not going to overthink it. Siobhan Rebel's on the board here. We're going to go ahead and take him. All right, Las Vegas took Will Johnson last time. I think, again, kind of similar to what I talked about with the Browns here. Running back is a position of need. It's a pretty deep draft class. You have kind of your pick of who you want. Of the names on the board here, Caleb Johnson is the best name here, so we're going to go ahead and take Caleb Johnson. All right, New England took Travis Hunter last time, so that kind of fills two positions with one. You kind of fill wide receiver and corner. I think offensive line has to be a priority for this team, and there are a couple names here who I really do like, and one of them is Tyler Booker. The offensive line entirely was a big-time mess this year, so bringing in Tyler Booker would give a presence that could potentially move Mike Onwenu back out to tackle, so we're to keep Tyler Booker here. He could even possibly move inside to play center to be a David Andrews replacement. Chicago's on the board. They took Ashton Genty with the first pick. This pick, you have to take an offensive lineman. I'm thinking Donovan Jackson, who's here. He could play tackle. He could play guard. Has been moving up a lot of people's boards. He's been up in my boards a couple times, so we'll take Donovan Jackson here. All right, the Saints are on the clock. They took Ted McMillan. This time, I think I want to look at adding an edge rushing to the room, and of the names available here, JT Tuimoloau to me is somebody who I view as being a steady body who can be in the league for many, many years. I just don't know what I'm getting from Princely, and I think Landon Jackson's ceiling is a little bit limited. JT Tuimoloau, in my opinion, has the highest upside to be a really fantastic player while also having a pretty safe floor. All right, Chicago's back on the clock. They added a piece to their running back room and now their offensive line. I think this time now you look at adding an edge rusher, and of the names available, I think I'm tempted to take Princely because he is the highest upside guy on the board here. Was very productive for Ole Miss, just needs a little bit of time to develop. All right, the Jets took Malachi Starks last time with Kenneth Grant on the board here. I think it's a pretty obvious pick. You could even go Tyleik Williams if you're looking for somebody who has just a little bit more of a pass rushing upside, but Kenneth Grant to me is probably the second or third best interior defensive lineman still, so we'll take Kenneth Grant here. All right, San Francisco took Will Campbell last time. I think this time maybe you want to look to add something in the defensive line, and we talked about it earlier. Tyleik Williams is on the board here, so I don't necessarily think you don't take him here because he does have a very high ceiling. We'll take Tyleik Williams. All right, Dallas took Luther Burden in the first round. I think this round I want to look at adding a running back because I don't think they'll do so in free agency. Support Dak Prescott by giving him as much weapons as possible. And of the names here, I'm looking at Travion Henderson and Quinshaw Judkins. I do like Dylan Sampson, but he is a bit of a burner right now. I think I might go Travion Henderson because I think he's a bit more of the full package. All right, last time the Colts took Tyler Warren. I think this time they might want to look to add a cornerback, and I don't mind Darian Porter, kind of a late riser because he's really only had a couple, maybe like 1 year of really good production, but I think I might take Darian Porter here. I think he might be a bit of a safer prospect. He is a little bit older, standing at 24 years of age, so you're kind of not going to see somebody who's going to develop too much, but what you get is what you see is what you get, and I think you see a pretty decent player, so we'll take Darian Porter here. All right, Atlanta took the edge rusher last time in James Pierce Jr. I'm looking at potentially adding a linebacker, though they already have a couple bodies there, but Demetrius Knight Jr. and Carson Schwesinger, I think is how you say his name, are kind of eyeing my face here. And Demetrius Knight Jr., I think, could add a lot to this defensive front seven. 6'2", 245, 64 tackles last year. I mean, this guy is an absolute dominant force. We'll take Demetrius Knight here. Arizona is on the board. Last time we took Shamar Stewart. I think this time maybe we want to look to add something in the wide receiving core, although Xavier Watts is on the board here, who somehow is still here, but he might be taken off the board next pick, to be honest with you. But I am thinking probably looking at something on the offensive line here. Ariante Ursary, to me, can move inside to play guard. He can even stick at tackle. You could even take Jonah Savanaya, but I think he might be a little bit of a worse prospect than Ariante, so we'll take Ursary here. I talked about it earlier. Xavier Watts is on the board. The Dolphins could use some safeties. Xavier Watts just makes so much sense. All right, the Bengals are on the board, and the board has actually worked out quite nicely for them because none of the big-time receiving prospects have been taken off the board here, and I like a lot of these names, including Jack Betch, who gives you size, can stick out at slot, can also play a bit on the outside. Reminds me in so many ways of Chris Godwin. I also heard a comparison to Jacoby Myers, which I don't hate at all. Jaden Higgins would give you the size elements, but I don't know. Right now I'm between Jack Betch and Jaden Higgins. I think I might go Jaden Higgins. Yeah, I'm going to go Jaden Higgins here. Gives you a bit more size and a bit more of a down-the-field stretcher. All right, Seattle took Josh Simmons last time. I think this time maybe you want to look to add something in the linebacking room, and here we are with Carson from UCLA. Great player. The Bucks took Jahdae Barron last time. I think this time you look to add something in the edge rushing room. And between Landon Jackson and Kyle Kennard, I think I'm tempted to go with Landon Jackson. He's somebody who I've had as early as the late first, early second to now falling to around 50s, which makes perfectly fine sense. All right, last time the Broncos took the wide receiver in Emeka Egbuka. I'm thinking this time they might go tight end here. Now, Gunnar Helm gives you a bit more of the full package, although he's a bit of a work right now in terms of being a blocker, but I think he has the upside to be a great blocker. Elijah Arroyo is a pure receiving tight end right now. You're not going to get a whole bunch of him as an inline blocker. Gunnar Helm can give you something right now while also still developing, so we'll take Gunnar Helm here. All right, Pittsburgh took the cornerback last time, and I think this time you look to add a wide receiver. And truth be told, this is a really good spot here because there's a lot of names who I really do like. I think I might take Trey Harris. Maybe not. I think I might actually go Jack Betch. Yeah, in fact, I'm going to go Jack Betch. You have your outside receiver in George Pickens. Jack Betch can fill in outside. He can play inside as a slot. I talked about him a bit earlier. We'll take Jack Betch. All right, the Chargers took Colston Loveland last time. I think this time maybe you look to add something in the running back room. You have J.K. Dobbins, but does he return next year? Quinshaw Judkins is here. I think you take him. If Dobbins does come back, you always have the injury concerns with him, and Quinshaw Judkins can be a perfect pair alongside what you already have. All right, Green Bay took the wide receiver last time in Matthew Golden. I think this time maybe I would look at adding something to the secondary, and Maxwell Harrison is available, so we're going to go and take Maxwell Harrison. I'm a big fan of Maxwell. I think he can be a really good player in the league. All right, the Buffalo Bills are on the clock. They took Jalen Walker last time, and this time I'm looking at TJ Sanders here, and I like what I'm seeing. Derek Harmon is also on the board. I think I might take Derek Harmon because he gives you a bit more of a pass rushing element and a higher upside, so we'll take Derek Harmon here. All right, the Houston Texans are on the board. They took Gray Zabel last time. I think this time you want to add a big physical body in the interior of your defensive line. TJ Sanders is on the board. I think you take TJ. All right, Carolina took Mike Green last time. I think this time maybe you want to look at adding something in the secondary because you're probably going to lose Xavier Woods, and I'm looking at Nick Emanwari, and I see somebody who will be a steal here in the second round. I've seen some people put him in the first. I've seen some people put him in the second. I think he probably belongs a bit more in the early to late second round. All right, the Ravens are back on the clock. Last time they went ahead and took Nick Scourton. This time I'm looking at the offensive line here, and I'm looking at Wyatt Milam, Jonas Savania, Marcus Mbao, Cameron Williams. I'm fine with most of those names here. I think I might take Wyatt Milam. He gives you a bit more of versatility to play him either at tackle or guard if you need him to. Next, you got the Lions. We took Jack Sawyer last time. I think this time I'm going to add an offensive lineman, and Jonas Savania is here, and he would be a physical, imposing body. That would make a lot of sense for Detroit. All right, the Commanders are on the clock. They took the wide receiver last time. I think this time maybe you want to look at adding an edge rusher. A couple of names here who I like: Jordan Birch, Kyle Kennard, Jared Ivey. Jordan Birch gives you a bit more size. I mean, he's a big individual, 6'6", 295. Probably could play more of an interior defensive lineman. So I think I might go Kyle Kennard here. All right, Buffalo is back on the clock. They took Jalen Walker and Derek Harmon. I think this time maybe you want to add a wide receiver in the room, and maybe you want to find somebody who can give you a bit more speed to your offense because you have Amari Cooper, who I'm not sure if he's going to return or not. You have Keon Coleman, who's a bit more of your 50-50 ball winner. I'm blanking on the other guy's name. He's the best receiver. I don't know why I'm blanking on, but he's a bit more of like your underneath stuff. Maybe you need somebody who can spread the ball down the field a tad bit. And I'm looking at Tez Johnson here. Isaiah Bond could also be that speed guy. Trey Harris is also on the board, who could probably has the highest upside available. I think I might go Trey Harris here, even though Tez Johnson and Isaiah Bond make a lot of sense. We'll take Trey Harris. All right, Philadelphia's on the clock here. There are some question marks regarding their interior of their offensive line, so maybe you go there. And of the names here, I am looking at probably Marcus and Bow. I just view Cameron Williams as stick it out at right tackle. And sure, you can put him behind Lane Johnson for a few years and let him develop. But, you know, actually, I think I might do that. He could be somebody who you stick inside at right guard early on and develop him as a tackle over time. I just think he's a bit of a project right now, but Philadelphia could be the type of team that is willing to take on a project for a player that has a very, very, very high ceiling in Cameron Williams. And then lastly, the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, this team is incredibly stacked. I mean, this team just doesn't really need to do a whole bunch here, but they have some question marks about some certain players leaving. They have Nick Bolton, I believe, is a free agent. Justin Reed is also a free agent, and Trey Smith is also a free agent. So those guys, you probably won't be able to return all of them. You could go in the secondary and add a safety, and because you're probably losing Justin Reed and Kevin Winston, Lathan Ransom, Makuba. I like all these names here. I think we'll take probably Kevin Winston. He had a very good 2023 season. 2024 happened, wasn't his best year. All right, but this is the first round of my mock draft, and if you agreed or disagreed with all my picks, let me know in the comment section below. But if you enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.